All right, ready to do this?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, man, looking forward to this.
Me too.
Yep. Hey, Jason, how you doing?
Great, Andy. How are you?
Man, I'm doing fantastic. So I'm going to talk a lot here at the very beginning because what I want to do is just give the community a snapshot of you and who you are. I'm not going to even give you titles, Major Jason Pomeroy, United States Army, which is just a treat to be able to sit with you. You are the first combat veteran I get to sit down with. Out of the 50 or so interviews that I've done, this is probably one of the most exciting for me. Getting to know you over the last few weeks, really months, but the last few weeks, and trying to pop in on you and watch you operate, and just to see people around you and how they're moving and thinking and acting differently. It's an amazing thing to see leadership in action. And so I'm hoping that the community gets to taste of that and a flavor of that by watching you in this interview to understand who you are, where you're going, and how we can be a part of your vision, right, and your mission here in our community. So I want to start off, man. What's your favorite color?
I would say green.
Green. Why green?
Well,
Pretty obvious, but
I don't know. I think it's just John Deere green, Irish green,
so you like that lighter green, not the army green. I guess there's
Yeah.
shades of it in there.
Yeah. No, not even the army green. No.
Okay.
Definitely more the lighter, happier green.
Right on. All right, so real quick, and I call this the Mad Minutes. We're gonna ask some questions here. Would you take a luxury sedan or a sports car?
Sports car.
Why?
Just go fast, baby.
Nice. Why am I not surprised? So I've listened to a couple of your other podcasts, and I'm excited. I'll share those in the link below, and we'll announce that later on too. But going fast is kind of what you do. You've seen a lot of the world,
Yeah.
and
I
you've
have.
moved through it fast.
Yeah, and then ended up back here again.
So the next question, what is your favorite hometown restaurant? And do you have a favorite plate or meal in that restaurant?
I'm a little, the places I like to eat are definitely located here at Cedar Village.
Right.
Genova's is an awesome restaurant. You go into courtesies for the atmosphere
Yep.
and the waitresses, obviously.
Right.
And then Panda Kitchen's great too. So of those, I'm not gonna pick a favorite because I try to go to all of them about twice a month. So
Got it. Very well played, sir. Very well played. So we are sitting in one of your endeavors right now, and actually we're sitting in an office that I'm a part of too here with the collective. And so thank you for being a part of that as well. On top of a lot of other things we'll get into here over this.
Yeah, it was a
over
long
this
drive
next
over.
45 minutes. Yeah, a long walk. We've been sitting in your office here over the last few weeks and brainstorming about ideas in future, and it's really, really exciting. But the last thing I wanted to ask you before we get into the nuts and bolts of this interview is what is your favorite place in Harvey County and why?
I would have to say the fairgrounds, and it's because I grew up doing 4-H. Family is a 4-H family. We're very involved. Me and my 3 younger sisters were all very involved in 4-H growing up. Did 4-H for 11 years. And it was a big part of why we're even sitting here talking about leadership to begin with.
That's awesome.
So,
That's huge. Well, thank you for sharing that. So I want to go back, dude. I want to know who you were as a kid. I'm super
man.
curious. Like, who the heck was Jason as a kid?
Yeah. I was just like all the other kids that are growing up in this area. Growing up, I played sports. I went to school. Went to St. Mary's when I was in elementary through middle school. Then went to Heston for high school. I was fortunate to go to a small school. When you're an athlete that wants to play hard, you can play both sides of the ball.
Yeah.
It's kind of a cool thing about going to a small 3A school in the area. Learned a lot of hard lessons about leadership there too. Made great friendships. Been awesome coming back and rekindling a lot of those friendships from when I was younger. And I'm sure there's lots of stories floating around there about me, different circles and stuff. But it was definitely a great place to grow up. Great time to grow up. 90s in Harvey County was an awesome time. I felt like.
Yeah.
Walmart had opened up at some point during that period, and so we really felt like we had it going on as a kid, and a lot of great opportunities there. And
That's awesome.
yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Now, after high school, so you go through in St. Mary's and then Heston, great community. Then you go to West Point.
Yeah.
So tell me about that journey. Talk about just going from here to a whole nother world with the
So
competitive nature.
I think it was like most high school kids at that point where you're trying to figure out what the heck you want to do.
Yeah.
Like my vision of what I was going to do after high school was be a crop dusting pilot and a firefighter.
Right on.
That's what I was going to do after high school. And then 9/11 happened, sophomore year of high school for me, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do after high school. That angered me like beyond belief that we would have somebody that, and I've learned since then there's plenty of enemies of America on this planet, and the reason they don't like us is because we're the example of good, right? And so I've always been a person of action, and so I was going to take action in the event that something like that happened. And so I told my dad, I was like, "Hey, I'm going to go to the Army or the Marines." I was actually trying to find the fastest way I could get to a direct action unit, like Ranger Regiment or Special Forces or something like that. And my dad said, "Hey, have you thought about being an officer?" And I had no clue what an officer did. I didn't know rank structure. I just knew there was somebody that tried to harm us as a country, and I wanted to do my part to help prevent that from happening again. And so I looked into officer training routes. Obviously, you have Reserve Officer Training Corps, ROTC. A lot of colleges have those. Kansas State, my dad went to Kansas State. I was like, okay, so I applied to Kansas State ROTC program, was accepted there, and also applied for the West Point application process, which is very rigorous, very selective. And I was able to get into the prep school for West Point, which at the time was Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, was where that was located. So I went there for a year, tightened up math and English scores so I could move my test scores up. And then you still had to go through the application part again after prep school, honestly. But the failure rate out of prep school into West Point is actually very, very low. It's probably a good thing I did that. The academic rigor of the academy, the first 2 years you're there, is very, very hard. But yeah, so that's how I left here and decided to go that route, and found my way into the West Point community. So
Wow.
yeah.
So
So thanks to my dad for having that conversation. I think he understood like the potential I had as a person that I couldn't see in myself as a 17-year-old young man, and said, "Hey, look, you've got more to give people than you give yourself credit for." And I'm glad he decided to say that to me, because that changed the whole trajectory of my self-perception of what I was even capable of doing.
he's a wise dude, isn't he?
Yeah, I think he was also, concerned parent. It's a war. There's things you don't have any control of that your son or daughter is going to get exposed to or have to do in harm's way. And I think that would be concerning to any parent.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right on. So you went through that track, and then you get into an actual Army unit. How does that transition look when you go from West Point?
Sure. Yeah. So I think the days in my life after graduating, so there was proud moments in your life, right? And in that period of my life, the proud moments in my life were graduating West Point. I was very proud of that. And then I went to infantry training at Fort Benning, Georgia, and I got to hang the braided blue cord on my shoulder, which is the sign that you're a trained infantryman in the military. That was the next proudest day of my life.
Wow.
And then I got a chance to go to Ranger School. Was able to attend that process, and they call it an agogi in the school of Spartan training way back in the day. So like our term for, or a term for a hardening process you have to go through for the Spartans was an agogi. So I view Ranger School as like an agogi for our Army, and you have to harden yourself, you have to gain resilience, and you have to learn how to work through adversity. And I learned a lot of skills, but I really learned the most about myself in that period of time. 63 days, terrible. It was wintertime in Georgia. Water was freezing. We didn't have any water to drink for several days while we waited to like warm water up with our body heat, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Like very terrible, hard things to go through, but they shape you, they mold you, they change you. And I was able to then take those lessons forward. So again, graduating Ranger School, next proudest day of my life. And then you go to graduation, and 6 weeks later, I was on one of the last flights with my unit that I was assigned to at the 101st and heading to Afghanistan. And so
let's back up a little bit. Ranger School, what is the attrition rate for a knock school like that?
I don't even know. It's a lot.
Yeah.
And so it's 62 days straight, and you spend 5 days totally out exposed to the elements for 5 days at a time. And you come back inside, and they train you some more, let you refit, wash clothes, repack your ruck. And you go back out for another 5 days, and it repeats like that until you get to Florida phase, and then they send you into the swamps, and you're in the swamps for 10 days straight. So it's pretty heavy rucksacks. I kind of forget the weights that you had to carry around. Yeah, I could count all my ribs. Like I probably weighed 180 to 170 pounds when I got done, like 215 right now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you generally lose about 40 pounds, 50 pounds of weight going through that school. And then when they get you done, they feed you real good, so you don't look crazy skinny at graduation.
Yeah. When your family, does your family get to come for that?
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
awesome.
Yep.
That's really
It was a great day.
Yeah.
I was very happy to be done with it for sure.
So you go through this crucible, if you will, of
Yeah.
that deal. I'm sure there's some of your buddies you started with that didn't finish,
Yeah.
and that's probably really hard.
A lot of guys I had to talk into not quitting too. There's a lot of guys that wanted to hang it up, and you're just in a different mindset when you're going through that, because you're literally broken. You're mentally broken, you're spiritually broken, you're physically broken, and you literally are just like, I have to move my foot one foot in front of the other foot right now, and it's very hard. Like everybody hits a breaking point.
Yeah,
in
everybody.
going through Ranger School.
And if
Yeah, even the high performers, like everybody gets broken down.
that's a major
Yep.
deal. So sometimes the guy that you were helping stay there was a time he might have been helping you stay.
Yeah, so there was one of my West Point classmates, actually. I can remember a distinct conversation where he had just hit a wall of defeat, and he was in the bathroom, and he's like, "Dude, I gotta quit," and he just like had given up. And I kind of just grabbed him and I said, "Hey, you've come too far to quit right now. It's like, you're gonna finish this, man. Don't quit. All right,
Right.
go get some sleep, wake up, let's go do this tomorrow." And he ended up graduating with me and
Nice.
stuff. So
Nice.
it was cool. Like at the time, definitely. Like there's little things you remember through those snapshots. That's probably one of the things that stuck with me was that. So
You guys pretty close today?
I think he lives. So it's just like life, right? Like
Yeah.
proximity matters, and we could pick up tomorrow, have a beer, be
Yeah.
great, But it's definitely one of those things where proximity matters and stuff. He's still a good friend, Brian.
But anytime you see him, though, it's on
Oh yeah,
instantly.
yep.
That's cool.
Yep.
That's really cool.
And he's back to being a soul crusher. He's just out there doing life, killing it.
Right
So,
on. That's awesome. So you go through that scenario, and then you end up in the Army. You go do your thing. So what did that look like? Started out, and I know there was, I think, 4 days from now, 12 years ago.
Yeah.
You were in a really crazy engagement. Like you didn't think you were going to make it out of there.
Yeah.
There's other podcasts out there. We'll link those below on you talking about that. I think with
Great.
the West
Yeah,
Point group.
appreciate that.
And no, thank you for sharing these stories. And I wasn't sure how far we'd get into some of this stuff, but
Yeah.
I'm really curious about culture and what you get to bring to us and what molds someone like yourself, right? And so these are life experiences that most of us couldn't even fathom, even people that grew up like I did. I had never been in a situation exactly like that at that level, for sure not. And so, and I don't know for sure less than 1% of Americans know what that's like, because even some of the guys that are with you guys out there don't get into something like that.
Yeah, that's true.
And so, and I know in your position, you were positioned a little differently because of where you were. But I want to see tell me about going into the Army, culture at that point, and then up and lead into that situation when you guys flew out there. And if you could tell that story, that'd be huge.
Yeah, and I know there's lots of folks that'll listen to this, and hopefully this episode draws more listeners and viewers to watch it and learn a little bit about what this was about, 12 years ago. But also, just to say thank you to anyone listening that served in the last 20 years during the global war on terror period, because we have a volunteer force. We have a country that does not require mandatory service, and because of that, we have a very stable geopolitical environment, because we have a force that is based on love, right? We have a force that is literally based on I care enough about my country to go fight for it, and I have a love for my brothers and my sisters left and right of me that I will literally put my life on the line for. And there's a lot of folks that live in this area that have served, both previous to GWAT and during the GWAT period. And I'd just like to say thank you for stepping up and doing something. So I said proud days of my life escalating, right? So getting a chance to slap a 101st patch on my shoulders, because when you deploy, you actually get to put a right sleeve patch on. If you don't deploy, you don't get to put a right sleeve patch on. And so that had been the escalator of pride in my life up to that point, because that had been the goal. I had wanted to, how do I become a combat leader and go do the job, right? So I'm now on the plane, getting ready to go to Afghanistan, 2010, and May 2010, we took off, last main body, flying over to Afghanistan, and we were stationed in Kunar province, which is northeast Afghanistan. Some of the worst fighting of the 20 years in Afghanistan happened in that region. There was the combat outpost Cop Keating that was overran in 2007. I was up in that area. So a lot of the lessons we learned about honestly, we didn't learn a dang thing. We relearned lessons that the Army and Marines and fighting forces have learned time and time again. We just had to learn them in our era. So that was one of the, I guess I will transition into things that shape and mold you, and how do you try to learn lessons from people that have made mistakes prior to you.
Yep.
So you don't have to repay in blood for mistakes that were made previous to you.
Absolutely.
Right? So I spent a lot of time when I was at the academy focused on that. And I was actually part of a tactical shooting team, competitive 3-gun shooting team when I was at the academy, because I wanted to be as close to understanding the human condition, what your brain goes through in a stressful environment. I knew we were going to be going into hard combat at some point because we had just watched the surge in Iraq happen when I was at the academy. We would sit at our lunch tables and hear announcements of KIA eating lunch when we were cadets at the academy, right? And so it's like, okay, that's the world you're about to go step into. You better be ready.
Yeah.
Right? This isn't the minors, man. You're going straight into the majors, and you have to be ready to go. And so walking out of the door of that airplane when we got to Afghanistan, I was like, okay, here it is, man. This is like the Super Bowl. This is like the playoffs, everything all wrapped into one thing you ever thought of in your life is like the culminating event that you've been training for and preparing for. And I wasn't immediately given a leadership position as a lieutenant. That came 3 months after I got there. But I knew the real test was coming when I became a lieutenant in charge of people that were going to look to me for guidance, direction, and decision making. And at that time, I knew enough to just keep your dang mouth shut. Showing up as a brand new leader with zero experience in an area when the guys that you're going to be in charge of have been there for 90 days before you get there. You don't come in and change a darn thing. You strap in for the ride. You learn how to do the things that are being done, and then you eventually earn the trust of the people around you to lead them. Because leadership is not about giving direction and expecting followership. It's about inspiring people to want to do what it is you need them to do. So
Absolutely.
that was things I knew to be true. Now you're in the frying pan actually having to apply that stuff. And I walked into a fairly tough organization when I showed up, as far as people were kind of burned out on officers when I showed up. There was a bit of a micromanagement issue prior to me showing up. And so you ever been involved in an organization where you get micromanaged? Kind of turns you off real quick.
Yep.
And so that's what I walked into. So I went through several firefights with my platoon in Afghanistan, and it wasn't like any fault of their own. It was just the organizational dynamic that had developed. But yeah, I mean, it took me 4 months for these dudes to actually warm up to me.
Even going through fights together.
Yeah, going through fire, you'd be like, oh yeah, we slapping fives and stuff after. It was still like, screw you, man.
Yeah.
You're a lieutenant, you're the officer, you don't know crap.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
after that, but at the same time, you're still in charge, and the buck stops with you as a leader, with or without the buy-in of your people. And so there was this fine line of having to work through that dynamic. Eventually it all came back around, and to this day I can reach out to anybody in the platoon and we're cool. But yeah, it's definitely like, that's just the reality of it. That's people. That's dealing with people. That's dealing with prickly personalities. That's dealing with knowing you're doing the right thing and expecting somebody to actually buy into that immediately. It's not going to happen. It takes time for that to happen.
Yeah.
And so I think a prime example of that is it's kind of, you're referring to that mission we were going to talk about. We were 6 weeks from the end of the deployment from coming home. And we had to execute a large-scale air insertion operation where we were going to fly over 400 people into a valley, land them in different landing zones, secure high ground, and then go search buildings and eliminate weapons, materials, find key personalities, kill or capture them, that kind of mission, right? And the mission took a turn when we went in. We ended up losing 6 guys on this mission, and we ended up being there 9 days total, right? So that's like the snapshot there. If you go to the link and listen to the description about it, or if you want to watch a movie about that operation, it's called The Hornet's Nest, and it's on Amazon Prime.
Okay.
Where you can watch all about that mission. And we did that mission 6 weeks before coming home. We had already sent some guys in my platoon back as part of early swap out, because when you switch out a unit, there's only so many beds, right? So when 2 guys come in, 2 guys have to leave. So you do a little bit of hot seating and switching people out. Plus you need to take leaders around, show them the AO. So we had already started losing manpower at this point.
And that is
redeployment.
So here, real quick, just for operational purposes, I'm an operations guy.
Yeah.
You have some of your team that left, and those are the guys that you've been rolling with for a while.
Yeah.
So it's like a well-oiled machine at this
So
point.
those dudes are out of the country. They're either in Germany or back stateside already.
So no disrespect, but the new guys that come in, some of those guys are like the way you were when you first showed up.
Yeah,
but you
and
need
they
to
didn't
learn the
go,
ropes.
these new guys didn't go on the mission with us. They stayed back and guarded the combat outpost so we could go fly out and conduct the operation.
Okay.
So those guys stayed behind and manned the radios and manned the tower guard positions and stuff like that, and held the footprint, because you still had to maintain your footprint.
Okay.
It wasn't like you could just, hey, I'm leaving the house for the weekend, I'm going to come back after this mission's over. You still got to leave a skeleton crew to man the guns and radios, and like they could still attack your base while you like deplete your manpower and go someplace to conduct an operation and come back.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's constant. There's no like switching off when
Yeah.
you're in that environment. There's always something going on.
Okay.
Yeah, so we did this mission. So this is just like in context of where we were in this 12-month deployment. We're in the last 6 weeks before 100% of our people are back home with mama, right? So it was definitely like a period where we'd honed ourselves. We'd become, and I bring all this up because it's about building respect and mutual respect and like gaining buy-in with people. I knew what the right answer was. I knew we needed to keep our equipment maintained. We needed to make sure our trucks were rigged correctly when we rolled out. Because if you get blown up in an IED, what kills you a lot of times is the things that fly around the truck. So if you don't have the 50 cal ammo can strapped down, that thing turns into a 60-pound weight flipping around the truck, smashing you in the face. So you have to make sure like all your I's are dotted, all your T's are crossed, and you have to be disciplined about doing little things so you don't get people needlessly hurt in a bad scenario. And so because we did those things repetitively, right? We maintained like our standards, and we kept doing the things that kept the guys sharp. We did things like run like 2-man shooting drills on the combat outpost when we hadn't gotten in a firefight for a couple days, because I wanted the guys to stay sharp. I wanted them to be able to react, just muscle memory, no thinking, just reacting and shooting and moving. And that way, when the time came, it wasn't like you were going through it for the first time again. It was just reaction.
Right.
And so, and the NCOs were very instrumental in that. But it was those things of like, it gets old, it gets repetitive, it gets monotonous doing those types of things. Like, hey man, it's the right thing to do. You got to do the right thing, because you're not going to forgive yourself if the bad things happen and you did not do everything you could have to prevent the bad thing from happening, right? So we go through that mission, wrap up Strong Eagle 3, and we come home. Everybody kind of goes through healing from a tough operation like that, losing close friends, a lot of them within like 12-hour period. It affects people differently. And fast forward, people have had time to go through life for a little bit. Now I'm getting calls and reach outs on Facebook Messenger and stuff from guys that I served with that at the time, I didn't think what I was doing was really being that impactful. I thought I was just doing my job.
Yeah.
But I got dudes reaching out to me telling me it is literally because of you I think I'm alive today.
That's awesome, bro.
And, I just want you to know that. And I was like blown away. I was like, holy crap. I didn't realize anything I was doing mattered. I just thought, I know my job. I know what I'm supposed to be doing. I know how I would want to be led if I was these guys. That's just, I don't know how I operated. Yep.
You don't take shortcuts.
Yeah.
I was talking to somebody the other day, and that's what I was telling you. I had a conversation before we started the cameras. I was talking to a guy today, and I told him I know a guy just like that. And they were talking about a player who he coached, and he said I told him he was always in trouble, but I told him he needed to do 500 up downs.
It's a lot.
At the end of every practice.
Yeah.
Because usually he had 200 out to this guy and 100 to this guy because he didn't show up to class on time and he got a letter from him.
Yep.
But
Yep.
this guy, he says, you got to do 500 at the end of every practice just because your work schedule and everything else. We're just going to make sure that you do that, and that's going to be your payment back to us because you're going to be 5 minutes late too much. And I'm letting you stay on the team, but you're going to give me that. He said that he would watch this guy from the dorm rooms through the slat of his office. And he said he watched him and he would just walk away. And some of the other guys would go every 10. Some of them would do 15. Some of them would do 5 for a while. Then they would go, and said this guy did every 5 every time, every 5 yards he dropped. And he would do every single one of them. And he said he watched him a few days in a row to realize that's a leader. Even though he's doing all this thing, but he's staying here. He's doing everything. He wouldn't cut any corners. And he was in a situation where he was just in that position. But that sounds like I told him I know a guy like that. And I told him he's building some stuff here locally right now. His name is Jason. And that sounds like that kind of guy. He's a leader. He won't cut corners. He's going to do everything straight up. And I just wanted to lend you that and say that some of us see that and we appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate that a lot, Andy. Thanks so much for that. Yeah.
So you go into that, you keep going with your story because I want to hear about your friends and the relationships you have now. And then there's this operation that a bunch of, I knew a couple other guys that were involved, but you were involved with Save Our Allies, and you were mobilizing a bunch of stuff, and you were at a critical stage when that happened in your career.
Yeah.
Are we there to the point where you can talk about and unpack that piece? Or
Yeah. Well, I think it's funny. So to get off the heavy stuff, because I think it's more important, and this is specifically for the veterans that might listen to this, it's more important to remember the good and, stay in touch with the families of the people that we lost. Because the friends we had that died, they're no longer here. And their memory sticks and their families are still remain. And so there's a lot that can be done when searching for engaging purposely around, what did it mean when I lost a friend or lost a leader or lost a soldier I was in charge of. There's a lot that is left to do. There's a lot of purpose left out there. And so I know a lot of guys that feel a huge amount of guilt for still being here.
Yeah.
When they cared about somebody deeply that is not. And I would say that I struggled with that personally. I had to go through some help iterations with that. Had a great counselor to help me work through some things. And that wasn't something we necessarily talked about 12 years ago. And it wasn't something dudes definitely did not talk about 12 years ago. And I don't care who you are, what you did, or what level of echelon of like special whatever you did, it sticks with you, it touches you, it affects you. And so to feel like you did not have, or you cannot show weakness regarding getting help for that stuff, I would say you're misguided in a lot of ways, and it's in there, it needs to get out, and you need to do it with somebody that knows what the heck they're doing to help you get back to normal, get back to level. I personally needed to do it for my family. We've got 4 boys in our family. I want to raise them to be men of character, men of impact, men of consequence, And you cannot do that if you're off kilter, if you're not balanced. And you need to show them by leading them that it's okay. You can take that step to allow yourself to be vulnerable and work through those things. You're not dishonoring anybody's memory by letting stuff go. I know that was like my personal thing. It's like I felt I was dishonoring folks by allowing my guard down around that topic. Really, I was doing them a disservice because I was not being as authentic and as engaged of a person as I could be for any interactions I was having in my life.
Right.
So that would be, just like the plug I'd put in there for anybody that has a veteran in their life, especially in the last 20 years where everything has felt so isolated because we've had such a small portion of our country that actually did deploy or do into combat operations. We're very appreciative for the support from the country because there's been generations before us that did not have that support. And it's shameful and wrong, in my opinion. And like I feel very grateful to have the support of my country going and doing what we felt was right to help defend our sanctuary, which is America.
Absolutely.
And so, all that being said, I don't know, kind of took some side rails there,
good.
but it comes back to leading and being authentic with people, and eventually, as hard as it can be, in my personal opinion, I think you have to be a competent leader that knows when enough is enough and like take a hard stand and maybe blend yourself into like the managerial decision maker versus like the inspirational person and the aspirational, like, hey, this is the good guy that everybody likes. He's super easy to talk to and stuff. That person can get walked on, right? Jesus got crucified, right?
Right.
So it was like, that dude was a great leader and they killed him for it. And then you've got folks that are complete jerks that nobody in the right mind wants to work for, but they get crap done, right? So you got to learn how to like blend those two things together and like not get walked on. Know that, yeah, you turn the other cheek, but you got to know you got another cheek to turn, right? You got to have some pride. You got to know where your feet stand. You got to know when's enough's enough, and like what kind of what kind of toxic people not to have in your circle.
Yep.
So
and how to have them weed themselves out quick when they're there.
And then you also need to have grace, have patience, have an understanding that we are all human, and there is an ability for us to all forgive an aspect of things that happen that are not right, but also hold those people to account to once they have identified the failure, don't do it again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You screwed up, don't do it again. All right? Because then, there needs to be consequences for those kinds of things.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of, I guess, the philosophy I was raised with. There's also the philosophy I had to learn to grow into as a man and as a leader to implement those things in my life, and then have that around how I interact with people now, especially now getting out. It's a little easier in the military. Say I do a thing, they do the thing.
Yeah.
It's not that way. You get out of the Army, it's not that way. So regarding like, okay, getting out and like getting involved with evacuating our Afghan allies.
Right.
So the Foreign Affairs Committee had testimony earlier this month. And if nobody has listened to the testimony from the service members and the volunteers that got involved with that botched withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2001, you need to take the time to go listen to the Marine sniper sergeant that was at the gates watching what was the IED bomber that blew up 13 service members at the gate. Okay, that is the opposite of the kind of leadership we are talking about. Leaders that do not make a decision, that allow their people to just get steamrolled by the scenario, that do not take ownership for the scenarios they put their people in, those kind of leaders need to be held to account, must be held to account. And I would highly encourage that people educate themselves on the failures of leadership from the top down on how we executed that withdrawal from Afghanistan. And it cannot be forgotten, and it will not be forgotten by the veteran community. I guarantee that, because it is something that is the most abhorrent sin I can think of when it comes to when you lead people and you leave them to fend for themselves without giving them direction in a convoluted scenario. that is the epitome of what that looks like with how those 13 guys died in Afghanistan. So, yeah, it angers me beyond belief. It angers a lot of veterans, all veterans I know. It angers them beyond belief of how that was executed. And, you know, there's more facts that need to be uncovered. Firm believer in not allowing emotion to guide your decisions. But when you hear what those guys had to say about how that went down on ground there, and I know this to be true because I trained a lieutenant who was in the 82nd Airborne that was inside a Kabul airport, and so I've had a conversation with him. And yeah, it is as bad as I thought it was, and it's even worse with how the leadership has not taken ownership for lack of decision making and clear guidance to their people.
I'm one person away from somebody that heard it from the horse's mouth, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So we're hearing it straight from the guy that you know that was there that you trained.
Yep.
Okay.
He was a cadet of mine that I trained when I was at West Point.
I'll look for those links and put them down below.
And they brought that Marine Sergeant out for that testimony at the Foreign Affairs Committee. Okay. And they put his testimony on record, and yeah, asking for guidance, and no guidance came. Wow. And while we have 13 service members dead because of it. Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that and getting that word out.
Yeah, and I just know people don't pay attention to it. Who has time to listen to a 5-hour Foreign Affairs Committee talk? Not a lot of people. But when you care about it, you do. And then you start telling people like, hey, you should get your head up out of your desk, out of your drive home, and like pay attention to what's going on with elected officials and who is or is not doing their job right now.
Absolutely.
And there needs to be some people held to account for sure. Anyway, so we're at a point where I'm getting a little down a rabbit hole on it, but I feel very strongly about it. It motivates me deeply because if you're going to ask people to put their whole lives on the line for this country, you need to lead them. Plain and simple.
Absolutely.
You cannot leave them leaderless.
Well, then some of the people that you helped get out of there, like some of those people were close to you. You did battle next to them.
Yeah, so I guess that wasn't this last, that was around the same time frame. I mean, it was that time frame, right? It was August 2021 when Kabul airport became the place that we had to shut Afghanistan down from. There's no defensive measures. There's no organizational capacity whatsoever at the Kabul airport. Kabul International Airport was just an airport. Bagram Air Force Base, which had to get shut down because of, again, a decision that was made pretty high up in our organizational structure, shut down prior to Kabul Airport. We had the ability to do a managed withdrawal out of Bagram. Kabul Airport was just a civilian airport without any sort of protective measures in place. So you literally have people barring gates with their bodies, which is why we had people get blown up there. And I don't think a lot of people understand the tactics of all this and how that all played out. It literally played out because it was a terrible, terrible plan that people that shouldn't have been making decisions on got involved in. So, and we've learned, again, goes back to, we are not relearning any lessons that we should have relearned here. We learned how to mitigate IED blasts in the early stages of the Iraq invasion. Like, we learned those lessons 20 years ago. So when we see a kill count, like 13 people get blown up by an IED, that's only failed planning that causes that. Yeah. So, and you have to be close. We have to be like in this room close to somebody to set one of those things off. You don't get that kind of effect from somebody being across the parking lot from them. So that being said, I was on paid time off from the Army, transitioning from active duty service to our life now, and I was out at our farm converting an old shed into a home office, and my buddy sends me a text, and he's like, "Dude, check this out!" And it was that picture of Afghan nationals clinging to the wheels of C-17s trying to take off from the airport. I'm like, what is going on? Like, this is crazy, man. So I called him. He was a dude that went through Ranger School with me. He's like, I don't know what's going on, man, but like this whole thing is like going to hell in a handbasket. And I was like, this is crazy. And then all this stupid memes came out about how this compared to like Saigon or, the Vietnam withdrawal and stuff.
Ignorance.
And, and I'm just angry because all of this stuff is like, dude, what did we just spend 20 years doing? And I called guys, I was checking on them, seeing how they were doing. I'm like, you good, man? He's like, yeah, this sucks. It was like, we went over there, sweated and bled a lot. Now it's all going to hell. And it's like, okay, well, what can we do? And it became very apparent to me very quickly that the officer corps of the military had to step up to help fill the gap because there was no plan. There's zero plan. And honestly, I don't even know with a plan if the government could have pulled it off, because this whole last 20 years has been so network centric, not hierarchical organization like the Army's supposed to operate. Like big command says do this, little commands and little commands tell platoons to go do things. It is very intertwined, very like relationships based. Like we were doing a counterinsurgency operation for 20 years. And you don't fight a counterinsurgency with like echelon right tanks. You fight that like this. We talk things out, we sort things out, we can't agree, we get in a fight in a valley, we come back, we negotiate over some cups of tea, we sort some things out. So these relationships formed over the last 20 years between guys like myself that were officers that had interpreters assigned to them. And these interpreters were paid, however, they had a target placed on their back the day they signed the contract because they were aiding us. Without the interpreters in Afghanistan or Iraq, we don't have a mission because we can't communicate. We can't train. We can't negotiate any sort of terms with anybody. So this little widget inside of the last 20 years, these interpreters are the only reason we pushed any sort of headway forward in a strategic way in Afghanistan. The only reason. They are the grease that allowed the policy of America to move forward. And I don't think people realize those are the people that we left there, right? The people that didn't get out and their families, those are the people that we turned our back on.
And they trusted you.
Yeah. And so, again, I've got pulled in, got super involved. I reached out to my MBA network from Chapel Hill, said, hey, because there was a lot of vets that go through the MBA Chapel Hill program. And I was like, hey, you guys, who needs help here, here, and here? Real quickly realized a lot of people had answers, but no way to connect, right? So, well, shoot, I'll be a hub. I just put something out on Facebook, and that's how this all started. I just put a thing out on Facebook, said, hey, I don't have all the answers, but I'm connected all over the place. So let's you tell me what you need, and I'll make sure we're just being the link to this whole thing, connecting resources and questions and resources and movement. And so this is an example of how this all played out in a positive way. One of my classmates had seen my post. She had a friend that used to work in the State Department. She was trying to get her husband, who was a captain in the Marines, overseas at Kabul airport, right? So now we're talking about the person on ground next to where IDs are going off, okay? He is married to a person that used to be in the State Department. They have a Marine ally. She was a 13-year-old girl at the time that this happened. She stopped an IED from detonating on Marines in 2013, okay? Marines love her. She's like a hero in the Marine community. Not everybody in Afghanistan sees her that way. She gets raped and has a child, okay? So she's in Afghanistan throughout this whole thing. She is trying to get linked up with this person's husband to get out of Afghanistan. The Taliban take her papers away. So she no longer has proof that she is who she says she is and no longer has a way to get out of Afghanistan any longer. This person reached out, talks to me. She lives in northeastern Afghanistan, which is where I have all my interpreter family network at. So I reached out to an interpreter that I knew that moved to Houston in 2015. Say, hey, Abdul, do you still have people over there? Or did everybody get out? And he's like, oh, I got cousins, uncles, everybody's over there. I was like, okay. It's like, let's work a deal out, try to get this person. He's like, so is it back and forth? Right? I'm used to playing this dance. We do the back and forth dance for a little bit. And we end up getting 10 of his family members to escort her from northeastern Afghanistan down to Kabul, past Taliban checkpoints, all this crazy stuff, right? And we get her to the Kabul airport, and it's a mess, right? We did not see in America what was happening outside the gates of Kabul airport.
Heard it was
rapings, killings, beheadings, strangulations, like terrible things were happening outside of Kabul airport when our friends were trying to get out of there. Okay, like terrible stuff. And it's still going on. It's just everybody's moved on in America because that's what we do. And the things that were, so they show up, they're trying to get into the gates, right? And they don't know Abbey Gate, this gate, that gate. They don't know what the gates are because there's no labels,
right.
right? Nothing's labeled. It's all just like trying to. So we came up with a plan to where these Afghans would have blue ball caps in their pocket. And then when he got in position where he could see where they were at, they'd put the blue ball caps in. So they knew who to go out and grab and pull in so we can make sure to get those people in there. And that happened time and time and time and time again from a vast network of veterans that literally took 2 weeks of paid time off to sit at home in their living rooms and pick up cell phones. I mean, we were exhausted. Like people were working around the clock for 2 weeks straight,
Just bringing
across the country,
humans
across the globe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they just said, "Hey, boss, I got to take time off. I got to go help handle this problem." And I'm very proud to be part of the West Point community. Large part of this was organized by the West Point community that came together to like pool resources. I mean, we brought in millions of dollars of donor dollars together. We put flight packages together to get people out of there, all sorts of stuff, right? And I'm a very small cog in that wheel, but it was collective efforts from guys like me all over and gals and classmates all over the place that we were just like, this is wrong and we are not going to allow this to happen.
How many people do you think you were able to get out of there?
I forget what the total was that the whole organization was, but it was in the like 12 to, I think personally I was involved in about 1,200 evacuations. And I think total we got over 3,500 folks out. But,
Wow.
But I mean, the window shut so fast. I mean, they had like 14 days to try to get anything done.
Yeah.
The fact that we even did that in 14 days is insane.
That is.
And I don't even think the government could have pulled off something that good, given the scenario.
That's talk about service at another level.
Yeah.
And so I do know there's a next step here.
And I know there's a lot of really well-meaning people in government, and I'm just a little jaded about how the whole thing was handled. And I know there's a lot of people that are not happy that are in elected positions. I just really hope that people take it seriously, because there's a deep wound of distrust that just happened across the veteran community with how this was handled. And we lost a lot of face in the geopolitical sense. Who in their right mind is going to help America be the grease again to push their strategy forward? We're going to throw money at poor people. That's how we hire people, right? Somebody needs money, we pay them, they do a thing we don't want to do.
Right.
That's going to be the way that we get people to do stuff for us, but they're not going to be bought in. They're not going to have trust. They're not going to have internal motivation to see our best interest forward. It's always going to be with one eye like on us, like when are they going to screw me?
Makes sense.
You know what I mean? And that's like we as a country need to think like another couple steps forward in the decision-making processes instead of the thing that's like right here in front of my face, because that kind of thinking is going to really screw this country up in the long run. I mean, we see it happen time and time again at lots of different echelons, right? But it's like, what's the second, what's the third, what's the fourth order effect of this decision we're going to make? And are we really thinking through this? And we as a public need to allow that mindset to mature in us as well, because we should not accept an emotional answer from what we know to be an emotional elicited response from an elected official to be what satisfies us. It's like, does this really solve the problem multiple years down the road, or is it only going to fix it for my generation?
Right.
So
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing.
That's like, if I were king for a day kind of thing.
Yeah. No, that's well, we can do our lives, right? And the people closest to us, and you just giving this information out to the people that will listen to this, and there's some clips and things I'll cut from that to hopefully get people to hear the rest of it. It's pretty powerful because you've been there and you've done that, and you're still continuing. I know we have mutual friends that you're working with to look at the state level of how we can support some of our Afghan friends that are here because of the language barrier and culture barriers, but you're still working.
Yeah, because like just getting them out didn't solve anything. If anything, it created another 30-year problem. Like we solved the problem by removing them from immediate danger. pulling them out of a country that even if they were poor, they could talk to people. Even if they were poor, they could still get work in that economy. Pull them out here, plop them into a city. Where are they going to work? Who are they going to talk to?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That.
And we start a cycle for them that's unhealthy here because
Yeah.
of their kids
Who's
end
gonna
up in the streets doing
Right?
things.
Like who's going to hire a guy or gal they can't communicate with?
Right. But see, you're still mission driven, and I know that you're talking to people, and
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to hearing more about that and how I can be involved in the next steps there.
Yeah.
Because that's what you do, right? You bring your community, you plant your flag where you're at, and you
Yeah.
fight out from that point, and this is where we're at. So I just want you to know that I appreciate you being here, and I see your leadership, and I'm excited about your entrepreneurial ventures that I get to be.
We are excited as well. We
Yeah.
are excited as well. Yeah, the group that was able to help band together and then buy the building we're sitting in right now.
Yep.
The Corridor Growth Partners is all built up of Academy graduates, 2 of which are hometown guys. So myself and Kit Regier,
Yeah.
both from Heston originally. I went away and came back. Kit is now an active duty F-35 pilot, very smart, sharp, smart person. And then we've got some West Point guys that are involved in investment activities, different places, and
Yep.
they're very excited. And I think the thing I'm most excited about with working with people like that is you're progress driven, trust enabled, right? So you focus on progress, but a high level of trust is what you're built around. And 3 of these people I've never met in my life in person. You know, all these things have happened just via remote calls and the fact that we all share a common background. So
That's powerful.
it is powerful.
And people,
Yep.
I bring trust up all the time, and I hear people that kind of slap me down. Andy, it's not about trust. I'm like, no, it is about trust. It's literally, for me, all about trust.
Yeah,
And
it should be.
when people don't earn or disrespect that,
Right.
I don't carry it. I just know. I bank it, move forward. Right? But trust is a big one for me. If I'm going to spend time in a certain space or with people, trust matters. And
It is the bedrock of anything valuable.
it is for me.
Yep.
Well, thank you for being one of those people and for carrying
really
yourself the
appreciate
way
the
you
time,
do.
man.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you and the stories. I'm going to get so much from this, and I'm sure we'll do this again. I know
I'd love to. Maybe I won't be so all over the place and angry about pullouts and stuff.
No, it's okay. We need to hear this.
No,
And,
yeah. And
I get to hear this because
most people can't get access to because
that's the 1%.
it's well, and it's just you don't know because everybody's busy, working 2 jobs, trying to make mortgage payments, just worrying if the kids are getting to soccer practice on time. There's a lot going on in everybody's lives, and again, it comes back to trust. We would love to see that people are actually doing the things that we put them in position to do.
Well, the way we've met is pretty cool. And I'm looking forward to our entrepreneurial ventures in the future together and other things that we're going to be planning out and taking action on. And I know you're an executor when it comes down to it.
Yep.
One of the things I was talking to your pops the other day. I said, well, one thing I like about Jason, he knows how to execute. He will move forward on something. But here's another thing, and it's okay, right? A lot of people don't understand. Like you're feeling your way through stuff. And you know when you want something or when you don't, and you're a visionary and you got a big dream, and that's a good thing because you fought for us to be able to do that here.
Sure.
And so thank you and your brothers for what you do. I just want to commend you for being one of the people I look up to because of the time you spent doing things that I could only dream about, but then I didn't have to go through that. And
Right.
my son has a choice whether to do that or not. But if he's going to choose that, I for sure will send him your way.
Yeah, would love to talk to anybody about that has any questions for sure.
Right on.
I can be found most days right here at Cedar Village in office 223C. So
Well, and here's another thing, right? You're inspiring these businesses here in ways.
Yeah.
I got a lot of friends out here,
Yeah.
and I get to talk to them, and I pop in on some of the businesses, and I'm here too as well. The energy here is changing. It's different, and there's going to be a little bit of storm before it forms.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
I see the techniques from one leader to the other. I see you playing the long game in a way that is very healthy and inspiring. And I'm glad that you've chosen to come home and bring your talents back.
Sure. Yeah.
And I'm not a native here, but I am here now, and this is my home now.
Yeah.
And I'm excited about building with you, bro. Thank you.
Sounds great, Ian.
Appreciate your time, man.
Yep. Thanks a lot.
All right.